Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at Psalm 124, the recognition of God's help. Now, we start off with the superscription, a song of ascents. We've been seeing a number of these, starting with Psalm 120 and all the way to Psalm 134. But notice this one adds of David, so this is attributed to David as well. And now the psalm begins, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, and then he's going to repeat it. Let Israel now say, had it not been the Lord who was on our side when men rose up against us. So notice there's a problem, but we're starting off. The problem, we already have the hint. It's been solved. It wouldn't have been had the Lord not been on our side, but he was. And so again, had it not been the Lord who was on our side, and he was when men rose against us, we continue into verse 3. Then they, that is, those men that rose against us, they would have swallowed us alive. That's not good. When their anger was kindled against us. And now we're going to see that anger described in terms of water. Then the waters would have engulfed us. The stream would have swept over our soul. Then the raging waters would have swept over our soul. Notice how that swept over our soul is repeated first in the second line of verse 4 and then again in verse 5. So that's what we call the ascending part of this psalm of ascent. But notice the waters, the stream, the raging waters. That sounds like waters. Now, the stream might not, but the raging waters sounds a bit like water out in the ocean. And to the Jewish mindset, water in the ocean is always dangerous. Now, I grew up back when we were kids. At one point, we lived up in the area around Pensacola, and we had a sailboat, and we loved the water. We weren't really afraid of it. Maybe we should have been a little bit more. One time, I swamped that thing and got pitched into the ocean. But we grew up, comfortable around the ocean, comfortable around the water. That wasn't the normal Jewish mindset. The normal Jewish mindset, they looked at the ocean, and that was a dangerous place. Remember that if you look at Israel, there's no natural harbors there. And so, because of that, the Jewish people were not a seafaring people. If you wanted to find a seafaring people, you'd go up the coast a bit to the Phoenicians that lived to the north of the Jewish people. So, the waters, the stream, the raging water, if that's the ocean, it's a dangerous place. And even if it's not the ocean, let me say this about the desert, because you don't see a lot of water in the desert, but you can. Sometimes you will have a place where it will rain, not so much in the desert, but maybe in the mountains that are nearby. And the water will flow down the mountains into what we call wadis, that is, these dry riverbeds. And I'm told that every once in a while, and I've seen movies of it. I've been in wadis, but I've not seen this happen live, where water will flow down the wadi, and it will be like a torrent. And somebody's out in the middle of the desert, and they think, oh, this is, the one thing I don't have to worry about is a torrent and drowning. But then all of a sudden, this raging flood comes down the wadi, this dry riverbed, and it just sweeps people away. And notice the imagery here. It would have engulfed us. It would have swept over our soul. And then he repeats that part. It would have swept over our soul. So we're seeing the danger that threatened, likened to raging water. And now we come to the last three verses of the psalm. Blessed be the Lord. And so this is going to be the thanksgiving part of the psalm, the part that praises the Lord. Blessed be the Lord who has not given us to be torn by their teeth. Verse 7, our soul has escaped as a bird out of the snare of the trapper. And then he's going to repeat that part about the snare. The bird's not mentioned again, but the snare is broken. And remember how verse 7 started? Our soul has escaped. So the snare is broken, and we have escaped. Almost like a chiastic arrangement, short, arrangement. Escaped, snare, escaped. You see the flow of thought. And we started this section in verse 6, blessed be the Lord. Now we're going to see our help is in the name of the Lord. And so what we have here is the praise that's given to the Lord who delivered us. He helped us. His help was in the form of deliverance. And notice, it is the Lord who made heaven and earth. So notice throughout the psalm, we've seen God as maker, but we also see him first as deliverer. So it ends on the note of God as maker, but earlier we saw God as deliverer. And those two ideas, God as maker, God as deliverer, are associated in the Jewish mind, in the Pentateuch, in the Torah, with the Sabbath day. Remember that in Exodus chapter 20, that's where the Sabbath is first introduced. It introduces, remember the Sabbath, for it is God who made us. In 6 days he made heaven and earth, and the seventh day he rested. And so we're also to work on for 6 days and rest on the seventh day, as we remember God as maker. But then when we get to Deuteronomy chapter 5, that's the second giving of the law, and the Ten Commandments are given again, and the Sabbath is given again. But when it's given this time, and the rest of the law is pretty much identical, but when the Sabbath is given in Deuteronomy chapter 5, it's not remembering God as creator, it's remembering God who delivered you from Egypt, God as deliverer. And so both of these ideas, God is maker, God is deliverer, those are Sabbath remembrances. And it's good for us to remember as well. The God who made us, yes, but also the God who has delivered us, not just from the water, not just from bad things, but has delivered us from eternal death and has brought us over through Christ into eternal life. He is our maker. He is also our deliverer.